Okay, so I wanted to explain a little bit more about what my viewpoint is in terms of how I look at mythology. And comic books are heavily, heavily influenced by mythology. They are almost retellings if you understand the myth and where a variety of myths coming from. And I'm talking about everything. They borrowed from nearly every culture. But I wanted you to look at this perspective on how other people see the same phenomenon. Okay.
Mr. Price, can we talk about the note that you left on my car?
I've studied the form of comics intimately. I spent a third of my life in a hospital bed with nothing else to do but read. I believe comics are our last link to an ancient way of passing on history. The Egyptians drew on walls. Countries all over the world still pass on knowledge through pictorial forms. I believe comics are a form of history that someone somewhere felt or experienced. Then, of course, the
Okay, so again, this is M. Night Shyamalan, a major storyteller who has a lot of influence on our culture through his films in our current times, talking about how he views comic books in the realm of storytelling. It's been very important. Now, I'm going to show you a couple other things that support what my ideas were. The first is this. This is a snapshot of an article, and it talks about Superman and the mythology, the retelling of Superman's myth. Superman is a mythological figure now. How you don't accept that, I don't know. The variations in the character, even though some seem to be rather outlandish, do not change the core of Superman's character. That is what made cute Superman what he was. This immutability is the reason why Superman has become myth. These are not my words. There are whole studies on how Superman, how this story has been. You have to remember, Superman was a character that my grandfather read about, right? This was his generation. This came out in the 1930s. We're still reading about it now. My grandchildren, if I have them, will one day talk about Superman. So this is a cultural telling that is spanning multiple decades, multiple generations. Superman has become in our heads. He is the expression of what we think a hero should look like, what a hero should behave like, and what villains actually are in this world. I'm going to give you another example here about how life often turns into mythological stories. This is Richard Nixon, of course, one of our presidents who famously left office after the Watergate scandal. These are two renditions of Richard Nixon in very relatively recent media. This comes from the Watchmen series. And what Richard Nixon has done is transcended being simply a president or of a person. He became the symbol of an ideology. Richard Nixon has become myth himself. He is transcendent what most of us would have as a person and become a part of our lexicon or our storytelling in ways that other humans have not done. This other image here comes from a comedy film, right? Black Dynamite. And again, this is not about a hero. This is not about a superhero. This is about a period of time, right? A very tumultuous period of time for Americans. And he became more symbolic of what was going on. The Vietnam War, what people saw as conservative oppression, freedoms. He has transcended. Richard Nixon has become a myth himself in the same way that it says it's Superman. So again, you wanted to say that it was limited, that because I was picking heroes. This is what humans are talking about. The idea how we see the future, right? When we sit back and we look at stories like the Terminator or ideas about how we see the future, AI. Isaac Asimov was writing mythology because this was cultural expressions about how humans saw an idea or phenomenon. Just because they were not written 5,000 years ago it does not change what the core of what these images, these ideas, these stories, and these figures actually mean to us. Now, something I did want to focus on is that you said I was being disrespectful to these cultures. First of all, I don't give an opinion of anyone's mythology. I take it as purely as it comes. I will read Norse mythology, Aztec mythology, African mythology, and try to incorporate that in nice tellings on the story, to talk about their characters or figures, looking for links in between. So if nothing, I'm never disrespectful to anyone's culture. I take a particular issue with you framing the argument in that way. I haven't said anything derogatory about you, and I will choose to refrain from doing so. But I'm telling you, like however you see mythology, however you see the storytelling, I'm sure it's perfectly fine. The reason I incorporate comic book tellings on my story is because I've always seen a common thread between that storytelling and more ancient storytelling. And that's not going to change. A lot of times they're reflecting characters that exist in ancient mythology, but a lot of times we're tracking new characters and figures that we will talk about forever. Whether you like the way those stories are told, whether you have a particular issue with modern mythology, I think that's something that you're going to have to sort out yourself. But I am not the only one, clearly, from what we're seeing here in this particular piece, that there has been a whole study about how Superman has become a mythological figure, that is what he represents. Both philosophers and other writers have talked about this in their texts, the myth of Superman.